It was raining the morning we reached the airport. My mother held my hand so tight it hurt, glancing over her shoulder at the crowd. A man in gray was watching us from the gate. She pulled me behind a pillar and knelt to my height. "Grace, listen carefully," she whispered. "Stand right here. Do not move for anyone." Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. She pressed something small into my palm, closed my fingers around it, and kissed my forehead. Then she walked into the crowd, and I watched her indigo scarf until it disappeared. I stood exactly where she left me. An hour passed, then 2, then 6. She never came back. My mother was not running from me. She was running out of time. 11 months earlier, a doctor in a small clinic off Allen Avenue told her the cancer in her body had already spread too far to fight, and that she likely had less than a year left. She spent that year doing one thing only: finding somebody safe to leave me with, and making sure the people chasing us would never think to look there. If you're new here, this channel tells true feeling family stories from across Nigeria every week. Now, back to that departure hall, because a stranger was about to change everything. A tall man in a faded airport chaplaincy uniform noticed a 9-year-old standing motionless for hours, refusing every offer of help, refusing to cry, refusing to move an inch from the exact tile her mother had told her to stand on. His name was David Okafor. He crouched down to my height, the way my mother had, and asked my name. Something shifted in his face, a flicker of recognition he did not explain. He simply knew, from 20 years working that terminal, that a child standing that still had been told to stay by someone who loved her desperately. Security searched the cameras and found my mother's car abandoned in the long-stay car park 2 days later, engine cold, her handbag still on the seat, and a single folded note in the glove box, with only my name on it. No one could explain why a woman who meant to come back. For 6 weeks, I lived in temporary state care, while officers tried to trace a next of kin that did not seem to exist on paper. David visited every single day. His wife, Ruth, began bringing food to the shelter, then extra clothes, then a hairbrush because she said my plaits were coming undone and no one there knew how to fix them properly. When the paperwork finally allowed it, they became my foster parents, and their small flat behind a fabric market became the first place that ever felt permanently mine. Ruth kept a kitchen towel over her shoulder at all times, like a flag of surrender to whatever mess I made, and she never once made me feel like a burden that had landed on her by accident. David kept his old chaplaincy lanyard hanging by the front door for years, long after he changed jobs, as if some part of him was still standing at that gate, waiting for my mother to come collect an explanation. I grew up as Grace Okafor in every way that mattered, even though the surname on my birth certificate still read Adeyemi. I built a whole life around one unshakable belief: that my mother had looked at a 9-year-old and decided she was not worth the trouble of staying. I told myself that story until it hardened into something like armor. I became a community health nurse, the kind of woman who shows up early and leaves late, who is uncomfortable depending on anyone, who buys herself a small gold pendant shaped like an airplane the day she qualifies, as a private, bitter little joke only she understands. I did not date seriously for years. I did not trust easily. Ruth used to say I loved people the way I stood in that airport, present, dutiful, and quietly braced to be left. That was the shape of my life for 23 years, right up until a courier arrived at the clinic with an envelope from a law firm I had never heard of, addressed to a name I had not used since I was 9 years old: Grace Adeyemi. The letter was from a lawyer representing a dying businessman named Michael Bello, who claimed in careful legal language to be my biological father, and who was asking, not demanding, asking, for one meeting before his condition worsened further. I nearly threw it away. My mother had told me, the few times I'd asked as a small child, before the airport, that my father had died before I was born. I assumed this letter was either a scam or a very cruel coincidence involving a stranger with the same claim. Ruth was the one who convinced me to at least sit across a table from the man, if only to prove him wrong. So I went, mostly to close the door properly, expecting 5 uncomfortable minutes and an easy exit. Michael Bello was nothing like I imagined a con artist to be. He was an old man in a wheelchair now, oxygen tube under his nose, and when I walked in, he stared at me for a long moment, turning the signet ring on his finger, and said my mother's full name like it still cost him something. He told me he had loved Patricia Adeyemi since they were 22, before his family's wealth and expectations closed around him like a fist. His father had arranged a different marriage for him and made it violently clear that a poor girl from the wrong side of Lagos would never raise an heir to the Bello name. Michael had fought for her, he said, but not hard enough, and by the time he was free to choose her openly, Patricia had already vanished with me. He had spent 23 years hiring investigators who kept losing our trail, because my mother moved us 3 times in the first 2 years alone. He assumed she simply wanted nothing more to do with him. It was only once his own diagnosis forced him to settle his affairs that an investigator found one unmistakable thread: a woman matching Patricia's description, treated at a public clinic under a slightly altered name, listing a daughter's address that traced straight back to a flat behind a Lagos fabric market. My hands were shaking by the time he finished. My mother had been alive for years after that airport, alive, nearby, and never once tried to see me. That was the part I could not forgive, sitting in that hospital room. Not the running, the staying away afterward, when she clearly could have come back. I told Michael as much, more sharply than I meant to, and he did not defend her. He simply reached into a drawer beside his bed and handed me a small wooden box, worn smooth at the corners, that his investigator had recovered from a storage unit Patricia had been quietly renting, under yet another name, for over a decade. He said he had not opened it. He said it was mine to open first. Inside that box were 17 unsent letters, each one dated, each addressed to me, spanning every year since the airport. I read them in the hospital parking lot until the light changed twice. In the earliest ones, my mother described watching me from a distance outside my school gate on my birthday, too afraid to cross the street in case one of the Bello family's old watchers recognized her. Here is the piece that broke something open in my chest. She never really left Lagos. She lived less than 9 kilometers from me for years, close enough to watch, never close enough to risk it. Patricia had learned, days before that morning at the airport, that Michael's older brother, determined to protect the family's business from any illegitimate claim, had hired people to make sure a poor woman's daughter never grew up to complicate the Bello inheritance. 2 months earlier, someone had followed her home twice and tried to bribe a neighbor for her daughter's school schedule. Patricia had no money and no power, but she had one thing his brother did not expect: total, immediate willingness to disappear. She chose the busiest place she could think of, let herself be seen boarding a domestic flight under her real name to draw watchers away, then quietly doubled back into the city under a new name, alone, to watch from a safe distance while I was folded into a family that could protect me. The letters explained the diagnosis too, in her own plain handwriting, dated 11 months before the airport. She wrote that she had 2 impossible choices: keep me close and risk both our lives to men who saw children as leverage, or vanish loudly enough that anyone hunting her would believe the trail had gone cold, and then spend whatever time her body still gave her, simply making sure I never needed her again. She chose the second one, and never once told me, because telling me would have meant asking a 9-year-old to carry a secret large enough to get us both killed. In the last letter, dated barely 3 months before her death 2 years ago, she wrote that her only real fear was not dying. It was that I would spend my whole life believing she left because she didn't love me enough to stay, when the truth was the exact opposite. She loved me enough to become a stranger. I sat with those 17 letters for 3 days before I could speak to anyone about them, not even Ruth. When I finally went back to the hospital, Michael was weaker, and an elderly woman was sitting beside his bed, tapping an ivory-handled cane once against the floor before she spoke, the way I would later learn she always did before saying something that mattered. She introduced herself as Comfort Bello, my grandmother, and said she had spent 23 years assuming her son's old sweetheart had simply taken the money and run. The story her own husband had fed the family to close the matter quietly. When she learned the truth from the investigator's file, she told me she had wept for a woman she had never once tried to find. She reached for my hand the way you reach for something you're afraid might not let you hold it, and she did not let go for a long time. Michael Bello passed away 4 months after that first meeting, but not before he changed his will, not before he sat with me every week he had left and told me stories about a 22-year-old Patricia who used to argue with him about politics at a roadside canteen, not before he made sure his brother's part in what happened was documented, named, and permanently severed from any future claim on the family. I inherited part of an estate I never asked for and honestly still feel strange about. But the inheritance was never really the point. The point was 17 letters that finally let me grieve the right thing. I had spent 23 years mourning a mother who abandoned me. I got to spend my last few months learning I actually had a mother who protected me the only way she had left, at the exact moment protecting me cost her everything else. I still live near Ruth and David, who I will always call my parents in every way that matters, because love that shows up every single day for 23 years does not get demoted just because more family arrives later. But I also spend Sunday afternoons now with Comfort, who taps her cane once before telling me stories about my father as a stubborn young man. And I keep those 17 letters in the same wooden box, on a shelf where I can see them every morning. I do not wear my mother's face in old photographs and see Betrayal anymore. I see a woman standing very still in a crowded airport, doing the hardest, bravest, most loving thing a parent can do, choosing her child's survival over her own place in the story. If you have ever misunderstood someone you loved because you only had half the truth, I hope this reminds you to leave room for the half you cannot see yet. Thank you so much for sitting with our family through this one. It means more than you know.